This isn't just a theological statement. It's a raw, honest cry from the depths of a human soul, a universal truth articulated over 1600 years ago by a man who would become one of history's most influential thinkers, St. Augustine. And yet, doesn't it feel utterly contemporary, piercing through the noise of our own frantic lives with an almost unnerving precision? It's a statement that cuts straight to the core of what it means to be alive, to be human, isn't it? That deep-seated, often unspoken, persistent yearning for something more, something definitive, something truly ultimate that finally, truly satisfies the relentless ache within us. Have you ever felt it? That profound, unsettling disquiet in your own life? That nagging sense of being adrift, perhaps a little lost, maybe even profoundly alone, even when you're ostensibly surrounded by everything the world insists should bring you happiness. Perhaps you've relentlessly chased after those glittering, fleeting pleasures that momentarily distract but never truly fulfill. Maybe you've poured every ounce of your precious energy into ambitious projects, into career ladders, into social status, into relationships that promise the world, only to find yourself, at the end of it all, still searching for some elusive, deeper meaning in a world that often feels not just indifferent, but increasingly empty and chaotic. That constant striving, that almost desperate reach for something just beyond your grasp, always seeming to slip away like sand through your fingers. The feeling that no matter how much you achieve, how much you consume, how much you accumulate, how many likes you get, how many experiences you tick off your bucket list, there's still an unfillable void inside, a spiritual hunger that goes stubbornly unsatiated. Maybe it's a silent, existential doubt that keeps you awake at night, questioning your purpose, your path, the very substance and meaning of your existence. A profound sense that the meticulously arranged pieces of your life, though seemingly well-placed and carefully curated, don't quite fit together to form a coherent, peaceful, and truly joyful whole. If any of that resonates with you, if even a whisper of that internal struggle sounds familiar, then let me introduce you to someone who understood that precise experience not merely as an intellectual concept, but as the lived, gritty reality of his everyday existence. Someone who battled these very demons, not in some abstract historical vacuum, but in the crucible of his own vibrant, messy, and often tumultuous youth. Forget the hallowed stained glass windows. Forget the intimidating theological titles and the aura of distant sainthood. Before he was the venerable Bishop of Hippo, before he was a revered doctor of the Church, before he was a towering intellectual titan whose philosophical and theological insights would fundamentally shape Western thought for millennia, Augustine was simply Augustine, a young man, undeniably brilliant, yes, with a mind like a razor and a command of language few could match, but also deeply, profoundly flawed. He was intensely, vibrantly human, a man propelled by an almost insatiable hunger for truth, for knowledge, for understanding, and yet simultaneously held captive by the very earthly desires, carnal appetites, and burning ambitions that continue to plague so many of us today. Imagine him, a young man with a sharp mind and an even sharper wit, navigating the bustling, morally complex, and intellectually vibrant world of 4th century North Africa and then Imperial Rome. He was absolutely driven by ambition, by a burning, almost desperate desire for success, for public recognition, for a prominent place among the intellectual and political elite of his time. He reveled in the cut and thrust of rhetorical debate, spending years trying to conquer the most challenging philosophical arguments of his era, always seeking to outmaneuver and outshine his peers. And like countless young people across every generation, he was also deeply, inextricably entangled in the messy, often confusing, and undeniably compelling world of relationships, physical pleasure, and carnal desires. He openly confesses, without a shred of self-pity or false piety, to a life of indulgence, of actively seeking satisfaction in fleeting physical pleasures, in a long-term, illicit love affair that ultimately left him feeling not only empty but also profoundly ashamed and torn. He speaks candidly about his mistress, the mother of his son, Audiobook, born out of wedlock. This wasn't some distant, abstract battle between ethereal good and evil. This was a visceral, daily, agonizing wrestling match within his own body, mind, and soul. the constant, gnawing conflict between what he intellectually knew to be right, what he intuitively pursued as ultimate truth, and the powerful, almost irresistible pull of his own unchecked passions, his ego, and his burgeoning pride. Augustine was a man who grappled with profound, existential doubt, not just about the nature of God, but about the very essence of reality, about the meaning and purpose of existence itself. He cycled through various philosophical schools of thought: Manichaeism, skepticism, Neoplatonism, each time hoping to find definitive answers, trying desperately to construct a coherent worldview that could finally make sense of his pervasive inner turmoil and the spiritual chaos he perceived in the world around him. He was a seeker, restless and relentless in his quest for truth, and his journey was marked by numerous detours, by profound wrong turns, by moments of agonizing despair, frustration, and even utter hopelessness that feel alarmingly, wonderfully familiar even in our hyper-connected, yet often disconnected modern context. He was, in essence, a profound sinner desperately searching for a saint's peace, a brilliant, conflicted man desperately trying to reconcile his towering intellectual pursuits with his fundamental emotional needs, his profound spiritual yearnings with his powerful bodily appetites. He was us, in a different time, in different clothes, speaking a different language, but wrestling with the exact same fundamental questions about purpose, pleasure, pain, and the ultimate elusive nature of redemption. His confessions are not merely a dusty historical document, a relic from a bygone era. They are a timeless, living mirror reflecting our own universal human condition, a testament to the excruciating struggle, yes, but also to the profound, transformative possibility of finally finding that elusive, enduring rest for our restless hearts. Hey everyone, and welcome. Today we're going on a journey, not just through a book, but through a mind that grappled with questions many of us still face 1,600 years later. We're diving into the Confessions by St. Augustine, a name that might sound like it belongs firmly in the dusty archives of history, or perhaps an intimidating theology class. But trust me, what we're about to explore is anything but dusty or purely academic. The Confessions is, in many ways, the world's first autobiography. Think about that for a moment. Before there were tell-all memoirs, before personal diaries became a genre, before reality TV gave us a window into people's lives, there was Augustine laying bare his soul. It's not just a recounting of events. It's a raw, unvarnished prayer, a deeply personal conversation with God, where he confesses his sins, his doubts, his triumphs, and his relentless search for truth and meaning. It's a journey of the soul, exquisitely detailed, tracing every twist and turn of a brilliant yet deeply troubled young man's heart and mind. Now, I confess, when I first picked up the Confessions, I didn't do so out of any particular academic interest or theological leaning. I picked it up during a period in my own life when I felt profoundly uncertain, a time when I was wrestling with my own identity, my purpose, and the seemingly endless pursuit of something that felt truly fulfilling. I was looking for answers, or perhaps just a mirror that reflected some of my own internal chaos. And what I found surprised me deeply. It felt, quite frankly, like Augustine was speaking directly to my own struggles. This man, born in North Africa in the 4th century, separated by millennia and an entire cultural landscape, somehow articulated feelings and questions that resonated with my 21st century experience. His descriptions of a restless heart, always searching, always chasing fleeting pleasures, only to find them unsatisfying, felt uncannily familiar. His frustration with intellectual dead ends, his yearning for genuine connection, his profound moments of doubt, it all hit home. It wasn't a dry historical document. It was a deeply human conversation, unfolding across time. So, here's what this video isn't going to be. It's not an academic lecture where we dissect theological arguments or debate historical minutiae. While those aspects are fascinating, our goal here is something different. This is a shared exploration of Augustine's heart, a look at the universal human condition through the lens of his extraordinary life. We're going to treat this as less of a historical text and more of a guide, a companion for anyone navigating their own period of uncertainty, their own search for meaning. We're going to ask, what can Augustine's vulnerability, his radical honesty, and his ultimate transformation teach us about ourselves? Right here, right now, in a world that often feels just as confusing and complex as his. Throughout this video, we'll trace Augustine's remarkable path. We'll delve into his restless youth, his brilliant but wayward intellect, his passionate love affairs, his struggles with ambition, and his deep attachment to the material world. We'll walk with him through his philosophical wanderings, his intense friendships, and the profound influence of his mother, Monica. And ultimately, we'll arrive at that transformative moment, that moment of clarity and conversion that reshaped not only his own life but the course of Western thought. It's a story of self-discovery, of wrestling with temptation, of finding peace amidst chaos. So, lean back, open your mind, and let's explore why this 1,600-year-old memoir, this raw, honest confession, remains one of the most powerful and relevant books ever written. Chapter 1. The Restless Heart and the Stolen Pears. Welcome back to the channel, or perhaps welcome for the very first time. We're about to embark on a truly extraordinary journey through one of the most influential books ever written, The Confessions of St. Augustine. Now, if you've ever felt that deep, almost existential ache, that sense of restlessness in your soul, that feeling that there's something more, something missing, then Augustine is speaking directly to you, even across 16 centuries. He opens his heart, lays bare his struggles, and in doing so, he lays bare a piece of all of us. He famously begins with the line, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you, O Lord." And that profound statement sets the stage for everything that follows. Today, we're diving into what I've called Chapter 1, The Restless Heart and the Stolen Pears. And yes, you heard that right, pears. It might sound trivial, almost quaint, but this seemingly small act of youthful delinquency, recounted in Book 2 of his Confessions, is a foundational moment in Augustine's understanding of himself and indeed of human nature. Imagine this, young Augustine, a teenager full of undirected energy and a budding intellect, out with a gang of friends late one night. They come across a neighbor's pear tree. Now, this wasn't about hunger. Augustine tells us himself he had much better pears at home. He wasn't destitute. He didn't need to steal food to survive. And it certainly wasn't about the taste. He says the pears weren't even particularly good. What happened next is crucial. They shook down the tree, stole a massive quantity of pears, and then, here's the kicker, they took them and threw them to the pigs. Utter waste, utter disregard. So why? This is the core question Augustine grapples with, and it's the question that echoes through the ages, still relevant to us today. Why do we sometimes do bad things for the sheer thrill of it? For no other reason than that it is forbidden? Augustine confesses, with heartbreaking honesty, that he loved his own undoing. He loved the sin itself, not the object of the sin. It wasn't the pears he craved. It was the transgression. It was the thrill of breaking the rules, the shared secrecy with his friends, the feeling of power in defying what was right, just because he could. He describes it as a perverted desire, a twisted imitation of God's omnipotence, wanting to do whatever he pleased, simply because he pleased it. Now, let's be honest, who among us hasn't, at some point, felt that pull? Perhaps not to steal pears, but to bend a rule, to push a boundary, to do something just because we were told not to. This resonates deeply with the universal experience of youthful rebellion, doesn't it? As teenagers, we're often in this messy, exhilarating, sometimes painful search for identity. We're trying to figure out who we are, where we fit in, what we believe. And sometimes, in that quest, we act out. We might seek validation in peer groups, engage in risky behavior, or simply defy authority figures, not out of malice, but out of a clumsy, unarticulated desire for freedom, for autonomy, for a sense of self. The pear theft, in its own way, is a microcosm of that adolescent yearning, that restless energy trying to find an outlet, often in destructive ways. But Augustine goes even deeper than just youthful rebellion. He comes to understand that all our misguided actions, all our sins, are ultimately a distorted search for something good. Think about it. When we lie, often we're seeking to protect ourselves or maintain a certain image, a perverted desire for safety or honor. When we pursue fleeting pleasures, we're often seeking joy or contentment, albeit in places where it can never truly last. In the case of the pears, perhaps Augustine was unconsciously seeking a twisted sense of freedom from obligation, a perverse kind of joy in defiance, or a feeling of belonging and solidarity with his mischievous friends. These are all good things in their true form: freedom, joy, belonging. But when sought in ways that are contrary to goodness itself, they become distorted, destructive, and ultimately unsatisfying. This is the profound insight. Our hearts are wired for the good, for truth, for beauty, for God. And when we chase after counterfeits, when we try to satisfy that longing with lesser things, our hearts remain restless. The stolen pears, then, are not just about a boy doing a bad thing. They are a powerful parable about the human condition, about that innate hunger for something more, and our often blundering attempts to fill it in all the wrong ways. It's the very beginning of Augustine's long, arduous, and ultimately transformative journey towards understanding where true fulfillment truly lies. And it's a journey we're just beginning with him. Chapter 2. The Chains of Habit. A Slave to Lust. Welcome back to our journey through St. Augustine's Confessions. Last time, we began to uncover the restless heart of a young intellectual, always searching, always questioning. But Augustine's search wasn't just intellectual. It was deeply personal, fraught with internal conflict, especially concerning matters of the flesh. Today, we confront a chapter in his life that many of us, in different forms, can recognize in ourselves. The chains of habit, a slave to lust. Augustine's honest and often brutal self-assessment in this period of his life is what makes Confessions so enduring. He speaks of a long, often painful struggle with sexual desire and the profound, suffocating feeling of being trapped by his own habits. He was, in his own words, a slave to lust, even as his mind yearned for higher truths, for God. For 15 years, Augustine lived with an unnamed woman, a concubine. This wasn't a casual fling. It was a long-term, committed partnership, what we might call a common-law marriage today, especially given the social norms of the time. She bore him a son, Audiobook, whose name, beautifully, means gift of God. Audiobook was clearly a brilliant and beloved child, a source of immense joy and pride for Augustine. Yet, for all the human connection, for all the love and stability this relationship provided, Augustine still viewed it through the lens of his spiritual struggle as a diversion, a symptom of his unchaste life. He was intellectually convinced of the virtue of chastity, of spiritual purity, but his body, his habits, his desires kept him bound to this worldly entanglement. It's a powerful illustration of the chasm between intellectual assent and practical application. He knew what was right, but he simply couldn't do it. This internal torment, this agonizing division within himself, reaches its zenith in one of the most famous and, frankly, most hilariously honest prayers in all of literature. It's a prayer that reveals the utter frankness of Augustine's self-awareness, his almost playful yet deeply serious struggle with temptation. He recounts praying, "Lord, grant me chastity and continence, but not yet." Think about that for a moment. Not yet. It's so human, isn't it? It perfectly encapsulates the divided will. It's not a rejection of God's will. It's a postponement. It's the child begging for 5 more minutes before bedtime, knowing sleep is good but not wanting to give up the present pleasure. It's a profound admission of weakness, a raw display of a soul grappling with its own desires. He wanted to be chaste. He knew it was the right path, but he simply wasn't ready to let go of the comforts, the familiarity, the immediate gratification of his current way of life. He was bound by what he called chains of habit. This struggle, this prayer, offers us a window into the psychology of addiction, long before the term existed. Augustine describes himself as feeling powerless, as if an invisible force held him back, even when his rational mind commanded him to change. He depicts his will as being divided against itself, a sick will that chooses comfort over conviction. He knew what was good, he longed for it, but the deeply ingrained patterns of behavior, the comfort zones of his life, held him captive. This isn't just about sexual lust, though that was his primary battle. It's a metaphor for any habit we wish to break, any addiction, any pattern of behavior that we know is detrimental but from which we feel unable to escape. And this, I believe, is where Augustine's story truly resonates with us today. His confession becomes our confession. Who among us hasn't experienced this divided will? We know we should exercise, but the couch calls. We know we should eat healthier, but the craving for sugar or processed food takes over. We intend to be more disciplined, more present, less distracted by our screens, but find ourselves endlessly scrolling, lost in the digital current. We promise ourselves, tomorrow I'll start, or just one more episode, or I'll do it later. It's that not yet that still echoes in our own lives, countless centuries later. Augustine's brutal honesty about feeling enslaved by his habits, about his profound awareness of his own hypocrisy and weakness, is what makes him so relatable. He doesn't sugarcoat it. He doesn't pretend to be stronger than he is. He lays bare the human condition, the struggle to align our actions with our deepest values and intentions. He helps us understand that knowing what's right is only the first step. The journey to truly living it, to breaking the chains of habit, is often long, painful, and requires a power beyond our own. His story is a testament to the universality of the human struggle for self-mastery, a struggle that begins with acknowledging our powerlessness and our own persistent not yet. In the next chapter, we'll see how this internal conflict intensifies, leading him to a pivotal moment of crisis and transformation. Chapter 3, The Maze of Ambition, Chasing Success in Rome. As Augustine moved into his 20s, the small-town brilliance he'd displayed in Thagist began to feel, well, small. The intellectual curiosity, the sharp mind, the magnetic personality, these were assets, and Augustine knew it. He saw the world, particularly the bustling metropolises of Carthage and later Rome, as stages for these talents. He wasn't just seeking knowledge anymore. He was chasing something more intoxicating: fame, fortune, and the kind of influence that came with mastering the art of rhetoric. Imagine him in Carthage, a vibrant, sprawling city, a hotbed of intellectual debate and social climbing. Here, Augustine plunged headfirst into the world of teaching rhetoric. He was good at it, exceptionally good. He honed his skills, debated fiercely, and captivated audiences. He achieved recognition, a growing reputation, and the kind of worldly success many of us still dream of today. He wasn't just a teacher. He was a master of persuasion, a wordsmith who could sway minds and shape opinions. This was the pinnacle of a successful career path for someone of his intellect and ambition at the time. Then came Rome, the heart of the empire, a city where true rhetorical brilliance could elevate you to the highest echelons of society. Augustine sought out bigger stages, more influential patrons, and a chance to shine even brighter. He got it. He secured prestigious teaching positions, rubbed shoulders with powerful figures, and experienced the kind of external validation that many believe defines a life well lived. But here's the rub, and it's a profound one that resonates through the centuries. He found it utterly, completely hollow. Despite achieving exactly what he set out to do, rising through the ranks, gaining renown, mastering his craft, Augustine felt an aching emptiness. The intellectual pride, the satisfaction of winning a debate, the applause of a crowd, the financial security, it all felt like dust. It was a beautiful, ornate cage, but a cage nonetheless, lacking true meaning or purpose. He was brilliant, successful, and miserable. Doesn't that sound eerily familiar? We live in a society that constantly pushes us towards the rat race. We're told that if we just get that promotion, land that big client, hit that sales target, accumulate enough followers, or buy that next shiny gadget, then we'll be happy. We chase external validation with a relentless, almost desperate fervor. We stack up achievements like trophies, hoping each one will finally fill that internal void. And often, just like Augustine, we get to the finish line, look around at all our hard-won prizes, and wonder why the euphoria is so fleeting, why the satisfaction never truly settles in. We're left asking, is this all there is? Augustine's experience forces us to pause and truly question what true success really means. Was it different then? In a world where status and rhetorical skill could literally shape empires, surely the pursuit of such mastery was considered the highest form of achievement. Yet he found it wanting. And what about now? In our hyper-connected, achievement-obsessed world, do we define success by our job titles, our bank accounts, our social media metrics, or the opinions of others? Or is there a deeper, more profound kind of success that transcends these fleeting markers? Augustine's journey through the maze of ambition reminds us that sometimes the very things we strive for with all our might can be the most unfulfilling. His emptiness wasn't a failure to achieve, but a realization that he had achieved the wrong things. Chapter 4, Intellectual Wandering, the Manichaean Detour. Welcome back, everyone. As we continue our dive into the profound journey of Augustine, we arrive at a pivotal, perhaps even infamous, chapter in his early life: his decade-long flirtation with Manichaeism. It's a period he reflects upon with a mixture of regret and crucial insight, and for us, it offers a powerful lens through which to examine our own intellectual wanderings, our own search for meaning in a complex world. Augustine's brilliant, restless mind found the Catholicism of his youth intellectually unsatisfying. It presented mysteries demanding faith without rational explanation. His ultimate stumbling block was the problem of evil. How could an all-good, all-powerful God create a world with so much suffering and moral failing? He perceived the Church's answers as too simplistic or worse, evasive. He needed a logical framework to account for the pervasive darkness he observed both in the world and within himself. And that's precisely where Manichaeism stepped in, a religion founded by the Persian prophet Mani in the 3rd century. It's a profoundly dualistic worldview, meaning it posits two eternal, opposing forces. On one side, the realm of light, spirit, and absolute good. On the other, the realm of darkness, matter, and absolute evil, ruled by an opposing, equally powerful entity. This was a grand, cosmic battle, a struggle between light and darkness, good and evil, playing out across the universe and within every human soul. This offered Augustine a seductive, seemingly logical answer to his deepest spiritual and intellectual dilemma. Evil wasn't God's creation but a separate, equally powerful force. This absolved a good God from the problem of evil and, significantly for Augustine, offered an intellectual escape from personal responsibility for his own sins, which were attributed to the darkness within him, part of the evil realm. It was simple, elegant in its own twisted way, and profoundly appealing to his yearning for intellectual clarity and freedom from guilt. He spent 10 years immersed in Manichaeism, rising within its ranks. But his keen mind soon noticed inconsistencies, glaring logical fallacies, and the hypocrisy of its elect leaders. More damning were the intellectual claims. Manichaeans made grand pronouncements about scientific knowledge, but Augustine's rigorous questioning revealed their answers often faltered, dissolving into vague generalities or outright falsehoods. His hope for intellectual satisfaction rested on meeting Faustus, their celebrated bishop. Augustine believed Faustus would provide profound answers. But Faustus, though eloquent, proved intellectually shallow. He could articulate doctrine beautifully but couldn't answer Augustine's complex, penetrating questions on science or true philosophy. It was a devastating moment of disillusionment. The elaborate intellectual edifice he'd built his faith upon for a decade was hollow, built on shifting sands. Eloquence, he discovered, could mask intellectual dishonesty, and simplistic answers ultimately failed to satisfy a mind genuinely seeking profound truth. It was a painful admission, recognizing that 10 years of intense intellectual energy had been invested in a beautiful lie. Isn't this a journey many of us embark upon? We're drawn to belief systems, ideologies, or self-help philosophies promising simple answers, a clear path or comfort. We might find solace in echo chambers or ideologies with tidy villains and straightforward solutions. We invest our time and intellect, hoping they hold the key to understanding. But Augustine's Manichaean detour is a powerful, timeless reminder. True intellectual and spiritual growth demands more than easy answers. It requires rigorous scrutiny, the courage to question even what we hold dear, and the willingness to admit when our chosen path, however appealing or comfortable it once seemed, no longer withstands genuine inquiry and critical thought. It means being brave enough to acknowledge when the emperor has no clothes, even if it means dismantling a significant part of our personal narrative. The search for truth is rarely linear. It's a winding, messy path of exploration, disillusionment, and hard-won clarity. It's about being humble enough to be wrong, resilient enough to start anew, and courageous enough to leave the comfortable but flawed for something more authentic. This willingness to discard intellectual falsehoods, even painful ones, ultimately paved the way for Augustine's true transformation. Chapter 5. A Mother's Tears, the Power of Saint Monica. Welcome back, my friends. We've been journeying alongside Augustine through the tumultuous landscapes of his early life, witnessing his brilliant mind grapple with profound questions, his restless heart seeking solace in all the wrong places. But today, we're pausing our deep dive into Augustine's philosophical wrestling to shine a light on someone else, someone whose quiet, unwavering presence was, arguably, the very foundation upon which his eventual transformation was built. His mother, Saint Monica. Chapter 5 of our exploration of the Confessions brings us face to face with a force of nature, not through grand pronouncements or intellectual debates, but through the profound, persistent power of a mother's love and faith. Monica's story isn't just a footnote in Augustine's life. It's a testament to the enduring impact of a supportive, loving figure and the absolute power of unrelenting hope for someone we love. Imagine, if you can, the raw, aching heart of a mother watching her brilliant, beloved son stray further and further from the path she believed was true. Not for months, not for a year or two, but for nearly 3 decades. Augustine recounts how Monica never ceased praying for him. Her prayers not whispers of polite request, but fervent, tearful cries poured out before God. He tells of her following him from North Africa to Rome, and then to Milan, enduring hardships and humiliations, simply to be near him, to continue her intercessions, to offer whatever support she could, despite his often dismissive attitude towards her faith. Her tears were not tears of despair, but tears of hope, tears of a mother who saw beyond her son's current struggles and held onto the vision of the man she knew he could become. She mourned his spiritual death as acutely as if it were a physical one, but her grief was always mingled with an unshakable belief in God's mercy and Augustine's potential. She spoke to bishops, to priests, anyone who would listen, pleading for their guidance, for their prayers, for some glimmer of hope regarding her son's conversion. And there is one particular moment, one utterance from an exasperated but wise bishop that has echoed through the centuries, offering solace and encouragement to countless parents, friends, and loved ones who pray for those who seem lost. After Monica, with her characteristic persistence and tears, implored this bishop to speak to Augustine, to reason with him, the bishop, tired of her constant appeals but moved by her devotion, finally offered her these immortal words: "It is not possible that the son of these tears should perish." Think about that for a moment. It is not possible that the son of these tears should perish. What an incredible affirmation. What a powerful statement about the efficacy of steadfast, loving prayer, of a mother's enduring hope. For Monica, those words were a lifeline, a divine promise that sustained her through the darkest years, giving her the strength to continue her tireless vigil. They were not a guarantee of an easy path, but a certainty of a destination, a future where her prayers would ultimately be answered. As I read Monica's story, I often find myself thinking about the Monicas in my own life. Who are those steadfast souls who have prayed for us, believed in us, even when we gave them every reason not to? Perhaps it was a grandparent who always had an encouraging word, a sibling who never gave up on us, a dear friend who saw our potential when we couldn't, a teacher who refused to let us settle for less. These are the figures who, through their persistent love and unwavering faith in us, whether spoken or unspoken, help shape the trajectory of our lives. They are the anchors that hold us even when we're drifting, the quiet forces that nudge us towards our better selves. Monica's life is a profound testament to the power of unrelenting hope, especially when it's for someone we deeply love. It's not about manipulation or control. It's about holding space for transformation, about seeing the divine spark in another, even when it's obscured by confusion, addiction, or despair. It's the quiet, often unseen, force that keeps us showing up, offering grace, holding space for change, even when the path seems bleak and the wait is long. It's the belief that beneath the layers of their current struggles, the true person they are meant to be still resides, waiting to be rediscovered. Augustine's eventual conversion, His profound intellectual and spiritual awakening is often rightly attributed to his own journey and God's grace. But it's impossible to ignore the persistent, loving, and prayerful foundation his mother built beneath him. Her tears weren't shed in vain. They were seeds planted in the soil of faith, watered by love, and nurtured by an unbreakable hope. They remind us that even when we feel powerless in the face of another's struggles, our unwavering love and persistent belief can be a potent force, a quiet strength that helps light the way home. The story of Saint Monica is a timeless beacon, illuminating the profound truth that indeed, it is not possible that the son or daughter of such tears should perish. Chapter 6. The Voice of Ambrose, Hearing Truth Anew. Okay, so we've journeyed through Augustine's early life, his intellectual struggles, his restless heart. Now, we arrive at a pivotal moment, a true turning point in his intellectual and eventually spiritual odyssey. This is Chapter 6, The Voice of Ambrose, Hearing Truth Anew. Augustine, as we know, was a man of ambition, a brilliant rhetorician always seeking the next step in his career. He arrived in Milan, a bustling imperial city, with plans to make his mark. And it was there that he encountered a figure whose influence would be profound, Bishop Ambrose. Now, it's important to understand Augustine's initial impression of Ambrose. He wasn't drawn to Ambrose because of his faith, not primarily anyway. Augustine was still deeply entangled in Manichaeism, and frankly, quite contemptuous of what he perceived as the simplistic, often crude narratives of the Christian Old Testament. No, what captivated Augustine was Ambrose's legendary speaking skill. Ambrose was a master orator, a man whose sermons were renowned for their eloquence, their logical structure, and their sheer power. Augustine, the aspiring orator, came to listen as a critic, a student of rhetoric, eager to dissect Ambrose's technique, perhaps even to steal a few tricks for his own performances. He was interested in the art of the speech, not necessarily the content of the sermon. But something unexpected happened. As Augustine sat week after week, analyzing Ambrose's words, he started hearing things he hadn't anticipated. He began to witness how Ambrose, with his sophisticated intellect, approached the very scriptures that Augustine had dismissed as barbaric and unsophisticated. For years, Augustine, influenced by the Manichaeans, had ridiculed the Bible, particularly the Old Testament. He saw its stories of patriarchs of God walking in the garden, of seemingly crude moral commands as literal, simplistic, even absurd. He couldn't reconcile them with the philosophical elegance he craved. To him, the Bible was fit only for the uneducated masses, certainly not for a mind as sharp as his. Ambrose, however, presented an entirely different perspective. He taught Augustine, and indeed his entire congregation, how to read scripture allegorically. He showed them that beneath the literal surface of the text lay deeper, spiritual truths. He explained how a story that seemed primitive on the surface could, through allegorical interpretation, reveal profound theological and philosophical insights. The letter kills, but the spirit gives life, as Paul wrote. Ambrose brought this to life, demonstrating how apparent contradictions or crude narratives could be understood as rich metaphors, symbols pointing to higher realities. This was a seismic shift for Augustine. It absolutely shattered his long-held prejudice. Suddenly, the Bible wasn't a collection of simplistic tales. It was a text capable of immense intellectual depth and subtlety. It wasn't crude. It was profoundly sophisticated, just differently sophisticated than the classical philosophy he admired. He realized that his problem wasn't with the scripture itself, but with his own rigid, literalistic interpretation, heavily influenced by his Manichaean upbringing. His intellectual arrogance had prevented him from seeing the forest for the trees. And this brings us to a crucial point, one that resonates deeply even today. The importance of finding the right mentor, the right voice, the right context, to hear truth anew. Sometimes, the truth isn't new at all. It's always been there, but we haven't been ready to hear it. Our own biases, our intellectual pride, our preconceived notions, they act like impenetrable walls, deafening us to wisdom, no matter how loudly it's spoken. Ambrose didn't change the message of Christianity, but he changed the way that message was delivered and interpreted for Augustine. He presented it in a language Augustine's sophisticated mind could finally comprehend and respect. He dismantled the intellectual barriers not by brute force, but by elegant exposition, by showing, not just telling, the profundity within. This wasn't a religious conversion for Augustine, not yet, but it was an absolutely crucial intellectual turning point. It didn't make him a Christian, but it made him open to the possibility of Christianity. His intellectual scorn evaporated. He moved from, "This is obviously false and beneath me," to, "Perhaps I have misunderstood. Perhaps there is more here than I ever imagined." It was the moment his intellectual foundations, built on prejudice, began to crumble, making way for a deeper, more humble pursuit of truth. Ambrose opened the door to the intellectual viability of Christian faith, and that door, once opened, could never truly be closed again for Augustine. Chapter 7. The Divided Will. I want to, but I can't. Welcome back to the Confessions, a journey not just through ancient history, but into the very core of human experience. Today, we arrive at Chapter 7. The Divided Will, a chapter I've titled, I Want to, but I can't. If there's one single psychological insight that defines Augustine's genius, for me, it's right here. Imagine standing on the precipice of a decision, a life-altering choice you know is right, good, even necessary. Yet you feel a heavy anchor pulling you back, an invisible chain that binds you to your old ways. This isn't just indecision. It's an agonizing internal war, and Augustine captures it with chilling precision in Book 8. He describes himself in a garden, utterly overwhelmed, weeping uncontrollably. He knew the good he ought to do. He knew the path he was meant to take to fully commit to God, to renounce his old life of worldly pleasures and ambition. But he couldn't. He laments, and I'll paraphrase him here, "The new self which I was beginning to be was tugging at me to stop this madness, and the old self which I loved was holding me back. I was at war with myself, tearing myself apart. My will was divided, one part pulling me towards what I had loved, the other towards what I now wanted to love." He cried out, "How long? How long? Tomorrow and tomorrow? Why not now?" Can you feel the raw honesty in that? The sheer frustration? This is where Augustine introduces the profoundly revolutionary concept of two wills fighting within him. He wasn't talking about two separate entities or a literal demon inside him. He was articulating an internal psychological reality. There was the old will, steeped in habit, comfort, and the familiar pleasures of the flesh and the world. And then there was the new will, an emerging desire for spiritual truth, for God, for a life of virtue. These weren't just abstract ideas. They were active, battling forces within his own soul. One part of him genuinely wanted to change, to choose the higher path, but another part, deeply ingrained, still craved the ease and gratification of his past. And this, my friends, is why Augustine still resonates so powerfully today. Because this isn't just Augustine's struggle, it's our struggle. How many times have you said to yourself, "I want to start that new project, but I just can't bring myself to do it"? Or, "I really need to quit this bad habit, but I keep falling back into it"? That desire to exercise, to eat healthier, to quit smoking, to finally write that book, to make a major life change, that's the new will trying to emerge. And the procrastination, the craving, the comfort of the familiar, that's the old will, holding you captive. Think about addiction, any kind of addiction, from substance abuse to scrolling endlessly on social media. The person knows it's detrimental. They want to stop, yet they find themselves unable to break free. Or consider procrastination. You understand the benefits of starting now, the negative consequences of delaying, but you just don't. This isn't a lack of knowledge or even a lack of desire. It's the very same divided will Augustine wrestled with. It's the "I want to, but I can't" paradox that defines so much of the human condition. What makes this insight so utterly groundbreaking is how radical it was for its time. Before Augustine, philosophical and religious thought often externalized the source of evil or human failing. Sin was often seen as temptation from the outside, a weakness of character, or a flaw in understanding. But Augustine, through this intensely personal self-analysis, turned the spotlight inward. He didn't just point to original sin as an abstract concept. He felt its manifestation as a visceral, internal battle, a fundamental brokenness within the human will itself. He was performing a kind of psychological surgery, dissecting the very mechanics of human desire and choice long before psychology even existed as a field. He was saying, the war isn't out there, it's in here. This deeply personal, almost painful introspection laid the groundwork for centuries of thought on human psychology, free will, and the complexities of moral choice. It makes the Confessions not just a theological text, but an enduring manual for understanding the inner landscape of every human being. We're still grappling with the two wills today, perhaps just using different terminology. But the battle, as Augustine so brilliantly showed, rages on. Chapter 8. The Garden, the moment of surrender. We arrive now at perhaps the most pivotal, the most intensely human moment in all of Augustine's Confessions, a scene etched forever into the spiritual history of the world. His conversion in a Milanese garden. Up until this point, we've seen Augustine wrestle, intellectualize, theorize, but never fully commit. He's been like a man standing on the edge of a precipice, knowing he needs to jump, but utterly paralyzed by fear and attachment to the familiar. He had walked out of a conversation with his friend Alypius, overwhelmed by the weight of his own hypocrisy. He knew what was good, what was true, what was right. He had heard Bishop Ambrose, he had read the scriptures, he had seen the examples of others who had made the leap. Yet, he remained tethered to his old habits, his passions, his lusts. He was intellectually convinced, but his will, it felt, was utterly broken. He sought refuge in a quiet garden, dragging Alypius with him. The weight of his own inability to change, the sheer, crushing burden of his prolonged struggle, finally broke him. He flung himself down under a fig tree, tears streaming uncontrollably, a torrent of anguish pouring out of him. His heart was a battlefield, a storm of self-loathing and despair. He cried out, "How long? How long shall I go on saying tomorrow, tomorrow? Why not now? Why not make an end of my uncleanness this very hour?" It was the cry of a soul utterly exhausted, utterly defeated by its own strength. He was at rock bottom, his psychological and emotional defenses completely shattered. It was in this moment of raw, unadulterated vulnerability, amidst his sobs, that he heard it. A voice, clear and distinct, seemingly from a neighboring house. A child's voice, chanting repeatedly, a simple phrase, "Toli, leg, Toli, leg, take up and read, take up and read." Augustine recounted that he tried to make sense of it. Was it a game? A common children's chant? He had never heard such a game before. The repetition, the insistent simplicity of the words, struck him with an undeniable force. It was as if the voice was speaking directly to him, a divine command cutting through the chaos of his mind. He knew instantly that it could only be a message from God. He rose from beneath the fig tree, his tears still wet, and stumbled back to where Alypius was sitting. There, on a bench, lay a copy of the Apostle Paul's letters, the very book he had been reading moments before, placed there by Alypius. He snatched it up, his heart pounding, his hands trembling. He told himself he would simply open it and read the first passage his eyes fell upon, taking it as a divine instruction. And his eyes fell upon these words, from Romans 13 verses 13 to 14. "Not in rioting and drunkenness, not in chambering and wantonness, not in strife and envying, but put ye on the Lord Jesus Christ, and make not provision for the flesh, to fulfill the lusts thereof." In that instant, as he later described it, it was as if a light of certainty flooded his heart, and all the darkness of doubt vanished. Just like that, not gradually, not after another debate, another philosophical treatise, another agonizing introspection, but instantly, the burdens he had carried for so long simply dissolved. The long, drawn-out battle within him was over. He read no further. He did not need to. The words had done their work. What happened in that garden was not a triumph of willpower, but a moment of profound surrender. Augustine hadn't finally gathered enough strength to overcome his vices. He had utterly collapsed under the weight of his own efforts. He reached the end of himself, the point where he realized his own will was insufficient, broken, enslaved. And it was precisely in that moment of admitting defeat, of letting go, that he found freedom. This is the nature of many spiritual breakthroughs, I believe. We often think change comes from trying harder, from more discipline, more grit. And while effort is important, there are moments, profound moments, where true transformation isn't about doing more, but about surrendering completely. It's about acknowledging our own powerlessness and allowing something greater, something divine, to work in and through us. Augustine's conversion wasn't the culmination of his intellectual journey, but the breaking of his independent will, a yielding to a grace he had, for so long, resisted. The garden, the fig tree, the child's voice, the words of Paul, these were the instruments of a profound and instantaneous shift from the agony of self-reliance to the liberating peace of surrender. Chapter 9. A new beginning, baptism, and a final goodbye. All right, here we are, having journeyed with Augustine through his tumultuous youth, his intellectual wanderings, his desperate prayers, and his ultimate earth-shattering conversion in the garden. Now, we arrive at a chapter that feels like taking a deep, clean breath after holding it for far too long. A new beginning, baptism, and a final goodbye. It's a title that perfectly encapsulates the profound shift, the sense of peace found, and the poignant, bittersweet closing of a significant chapter in his life, and in ours as readers. The first major milestone, naturally, is his baptism. Imagine the scene. It's Easter Vigil in Milan, 387 AD. Bishop Ambrose himself is presiding. Augustine, now 32 years old, steps into the waters not alone, but alongside his beloved son Adeodatus and his friend Alypius. Can you even begin to picture the immense relief, the sheer joy that must have flooded him? For years, he had yearned for this, struggled against himself, against habit, against a certain kind of intellectual pride to reach this point. And now it was real. The weight, the accumulated guilt of a lifetime, the messy entanglement of his past, all of it, washed away in those sacred waters. He wasn't just believing anymore, he was belonging. He was clean. And to have Adeodatus there, his brilliant young son, his flesh and blood, a living reminder of his past sins, now sharing in this ultimate purification, must have been an experience almost too powerful for words. It was a visible, tangible sign that his entire world had been remade. He was finally truly home. But the story doesn't end with a splash and a sermon. There's a conversation that, for me, stands as one of the most beautiful and profound moments in the entire Confessions. Not long after his baptism, Augustine, Monica, and Adeodatus are in Ostia, a port city, preparing to embark on their journey back to Africa. One evening, Augustine and his mother are leaning out of a window overlooking a garden. Just the two of them, talking. But this isn't idle chatter about travel plans or the weather. This is a mother and son, connected not just by blood, but by a shared spiritual odyssey, talking about life, about death, and about eternal joy. They begin to ascend, in their minds, through the various levels of creation. From the material world, through the heavens, past the very stars, they rise. They talk of how their souls, too, can be transcended. And for a moment, just a fleeting, breathtaking moment, they touch it. Eternal wisdom itself, which abides above all things. As Augustine puts it, it's a shared vision, a mystical experience where, together, they glimpse the nature of eternal life, a place where all earthly desires are stilled, and there is only God. It's a moment of perfect union, perfect understanding between them, a profound spiritual intimacy that few ever achieve. Monica's entire life, her prayers, her tears, her unwavering faith in her son's eventual conversion, had led to this very peak. And then, just 5 days later, Monica falls ill. A fever takes hold. As she lies there, she tells her sons, with an astonishing serenity, "My son, as for me, I no longer find any pleasure in this life. What I am still to do here, or why I am still here, I do not know, now that my hope in this world is fulfilled." There was only one thing for which I desired to remain a little longer in this life, that I might see you a Catholic Christian before I died. My God has granted me this in abundance, in that I now see you his servant, despising worldly happiness. Think about that. Her life's mission, the singular purpose that had driven her for decades, was complete. She had seen her prodigal son return, not just to faith, but to a profound dedication that would shape the Western world for centuries. Her death, shortly after this conversation, isn't a tragedy in the conventional sense, but the peaceful, logical, and deeply spiritual completion of her journey. She died not with fear, but with quiet acceptance, her heart overflowing with gratitude. Augustine, for all his newfound peace, is still human. He struggles to hold back his tears, to maintain his composure, even as he understands the profound grace of her passing. But ultimately, he finds comfort in the knowledge that her mission was fulfilled, her prayers answered, and her soul at rest. This final goodbye, therefore, isn't just about a mother and son parting ways physically. It's about Augustine embracing a new beginning, marked by the purification of baptism and the profound, almost tangible sense of divine purpose that follows it. He had wrestled with himself, with God, with the world, for so long. Now there is peace, not a superficial peace, but a deep, abiding stillness in his soul, a clarity of purpose that would guide his monumental work and his entire life from that moment forward. It's a powerful testament that even after the longest, most painful struggles, true peace and purpose can indeed be found, often in the most unexpected and divinely orchestrated ways. Chapter 10. The Vast Palace of Memory. Welcome back to our journey through the Confessions. As we step into Book 10, Augustine makes a significant pivot. Up until now, he's largely been recounting his life story, his past struggles, his dramatic conversion. But here he pauses. He turns inward, and what he embarks upon is one of the most breathtaking philosophical explorations in literature. A deep dive into the very nature of memory itself. This isn't just about recalling facts or dates. Augustine describes memory as a vast, immense palace, a profound field, an inner storehouse of the soul. He's utterly astonished by its boundless capacity. It holds not only sensory images, the precise color of a sunset, the echo of a forgotten melody, the scent of a summer rain, but also emotions, abstract concepts, the intricate rules of arithmetic, even our forgotten thoughts and skills. It's like an infinite library, yet it feels entirely alive, pulsating with our very essence. It's where our experiences reside, but more profoundly, it's where we reside. And it's here, in this internal immensity, that Augustine makes his most radical and enduring insight. He realizes that God is not some external entity, far off in the heavens, but something immanent, something within. Famously, he cries out, "You were within and I was without." This idea is revolutionary. It means that the divine, the sacred, isn't something we have to search for in distant lands or through elaborate rituals. It's here, woven into the very fabric of our being, in the vast fields of our memory. Think about that for a moment. Our past, every experience, every interaction, every thought, every emotion, it's all stored. And it's in this personal archive that we can encounter the divine. It's a realization that has personally shifted my own understanding of faith and self. This brings us to a crucial, and perhaps uncomfortable, point. Even the shameful parts of our past are where we can encounter the divine. Augustine spends 9 books confessing his sins, his youthful indiscretions, his intellectual pride. He doesn't shy away from the darkness, from the years of wandering. And it's precisely in recalling these moments, in acknowledging them with raw honesty, in understanding their impact on who he became, that he finds God's grace and transforming power. The act of confession isn't just an admission of guilt. It's an act of deep self-scrutiny that clears the path for spiritual insight and profound healing. When we bravely confront our past, our mistakes, our regrets, not to dwell on them, but to understand and integrate them, we're not just wallowing in shame. We're engaging with the totality of our existence. And it's in that holistic self-awareness that genuine growth and spiritual connection can truly begin. The divine isn't afraid of our imperfections. In fact, it often meets us precisely there, offering mercy and a path forward. So, if God is found within, especially within our memory, then understanding ourselves becomes a direct path to understanding God. Augustine's journey is a profound know thyself. The more deeply we plumb the depths of our own desires, our fears, our motivations, our inherent longing for truth and beauty, the more we glimpse the source of those things. We are, after all, made in God's image. Our very capacity for memory, for love, for reason, for consciousness itself, is a reflection, however faint, of the divine mind. It's like looking into a mirror and seeing not just our own reflection, but a hint of the artist who sculpted us. To truly know oneself in this Augustinian sense isn't just psychology. It's theology. It's a spiritual practice of profound introspection. And this isn't just ancient philosophy gathering dust on a shelf. This powerful meditation resonates deeply with many modern ideas. Think about mindfulness. What is mindfulness if not the deliberate, attentive engagement with our inner experience, including the echoes of our past? Augustine's deep dive into memory is a form of mindful introspection, bringing the past into conscious awareness not to relive it aimlessly, but to understand its meaning and impact in the present. It's a continuous, active process of self-examination that, much like mindfulness meditation, aims to bring us into a deeper relationship with ourselves. Then there's introspection itself, the quiet, often challenging act of looking within. Augustine is perhaps the greatest practitioner of this. He doesn't just theorize about the mind. He experiences his own mind, detailing its labyrinthine complexities as he writes. He's showing us, in real time, how to navigate our inner world, how to map its hidden pathways and discover its treasures. And finally, consider narrative therapy. This modern therapeutic approach suggests that our identities are shaped by the stories we tell ourselves about our lives. Augustine, in the Confessions, is engaging in a monumental act of narrative therapy. He's taking his disjointed, often painful past and restoring it. He's reframing his experiences, his mistakes, his triumphs, through the lens of God's grace and divine purpose. He's showing us how to construct a coherent, meaningful narrative from the raw material of our lives, transforming shame into understanding and regret into wisdom. This process of restoring isn't just about feeling better. It's about fundamentally understanding who we are, where we've come from, and where we're going, all in relation to the divine. It's about crafting a redemptive story that empowers us to live more fully in the present and move forward with hope. Augustine's exploration of memory in Book 10 is far more than a psychological treatise. It's a spiritual pilgrimage within. It's an invitation to recognize the vast, sacred palace that is our own inner world, and to discover the divine presence that has always, patiently, waited for us there. Chapter 11, The Mystery of Time. Welcome back, everyone. Today, we're diving into one of the most intellectually dizzying, yet profoundly beautiful sections of Augustine's Confessions. We're tackling Chapter 11, aptly titled The Mystery of Time. Now, if you've ever found yourself staring into space, pondering the nature of existence, this chapter is going to speak to your soul. Augustine doesn't just philosophize about time. He turns our common understanding of it completely inside out. He famously poses this seemingly simple, yet utterly mind-bending question: what then is time? If no one asks me, I know. If I wish to explain it to one who asks, I do not know. Isn't that just perfectly relatable? We live in time, we experience it daily, we measure it, we plan by it. We feel like we grasp it intuitively, but try to define it, try to pin it down in words, and it slips through your fingers like water. It's like trying to describe the color blue to someone who's never seen it. We just know it until we try to explain it. And that, my friends, is exactly where Augustine begins his revolutionary inquiry. He's not interested in the clock on the wall or the movement of the sun. He's delving into something far deeper, far more personal. Augustine argues that time, as we experience it, is not some external, independent entity flowing around us, like a river. Instead, he proposes that time is a psychological construct, a dimension that exists primarily, if not exclusively, within the human mind. Let that sink in for a moment. Time, as you know it, exists in your mind. He breaks time down into 3 presents, which, again, sound contradictory at first but make perfect sense once you grasp them. He talks about the present of things past, the present of things future, and the present of things present. What does this mean? The present of things past is our memory. Think about it. When you recall a childhood vacation, are you literally transporting yourself back to that moment? No. You are experiencing that past event now, in your present consciousness, through the lens of your memory. The past itself is gone. It no longer exists. Its reality for us is purely mental, an image, a feeling, a narrative held in our minds. Then there's the present of things future. This is our expectation. When you anticipate an upcoming trip, or dread a difficult conversation, or hope for a better tomorrow, you are experiencing the future now, in your present mind. The future hasn't happened yet. It doesn't exist outside of your thoughts, your plans, your hopes, or your fears. It's a projection, a mental map, an expectation that shapes your present actions and feelings. And what about the present of things present? This, Augustine argues, is the only part that actually exists in reality. But it's so fleeting, isn't it? As soon as you perceive a moment, it's already slipping into the past. It's the instant, the now, the very blink of an eye. For Augustine, the past is preserved in memory, the future is anticipated in expectation, but the present is where our attention resides, constantly moving, constantly becoming the past. It's through these mental acts of remembering, attending, and expecting that we stretch time and give it its perceived duration. Now, why is this so revolutionary, and what does it have to do with God? Augustine, ever the theologian, wasn't just doing abstract philosophy. His ultimate goal was to understand the nature of God. If time is a human construct existing in our minds, then a divine being who is not human, a being who created us and our capacity for thought, would necessarily exist outside of time. This means God doesn't remember the past in the way we do, nor does God anticipate the future. For God, there is no past or future, only an eternal, unchanging present. God doesn't see into the future because the future hasn't happened yet in a temporal sense. Rather, God simply is in a timeless dimension where all moments, past, present, and future from our perspective, are eternally present. This allows us to grasp God's omnipotence and omniscience in a way that transcends our linear human understanding. It's not just that God existed before time began or will exist after it ends. It's that God is in a state utterly independent of our temporal experience. This ancient philosophical inquiry, believe it or not, has profound resonance with a very modern spiritual practice, living in the now. If the past exists only in our memory, and the future only in our expectation, then the only moment that truly has reality is this very instant. All our regrets about what has been, all our anxieties about what might be, are, in a profound sense, mental constructs that pull us away from the one true reality we possess, the present moment. Augustine, long before mindfulness was a buzzword, was inviting us to consider the liberation that comes from truly inhabiting the present, to release the mental grip of the past, to let go of the speculative weight of the future, and to simply be here now. It's a call to attention, to a profound engagement with the reality of this moment, free from the often heavy burdens of what was and what might be. His ideas about time aren't just an intellectual exercise. They are an invitation to reevaluate how we live, how we perceive our existence, and how we relate to the divine. It's a powerful reminder that much of our suffering comes from dwelling in mental projections, rather than fully embracing the only time that is ever truly ours, the eternal now. Augustine's genius lies in taking something so fundamental, so seemingly obvious, and revealing its incredible depth and mystery, profoundly changing how we understand ourselves and our place in the universe, or perhaps our place outside of it. Chapter 12, The Destination, Rest for the Soul. We've journeyed through the tumultuous, brilliant, and deeply human life of Augustine of Hippo. We've seen him grapple with philosophy, faith, love, loss, ambition, and despair. And as we reach the culmination of our exploration of his Confessions, it feels only right to return to the very beginning, to that iconic declaration that sets the stage for everything that follows. You have made us for yourself, O Lord, and our heart is restless until it rests in you. Think back to the young Augustine, the brilliant student, hungry for knowledge, eager for intellectual victories. He sought satisfaction in worldly success, in the embrace of eloquent words, in the allure of physical pleasure, in the intricate debates of philosophy. He chased after truth in Manichaeism, believing he had found a coherent explanation for the world's dualities. He found temporary solace in profound friendships and profound heartbreak in their loss. Each pursuit, each passion, each intellectual conquest offered a glimpse of something greater, a fleeting taste of contentment, but never a lasting peace. His journey was a relentless seeking, an insatiable hunger for something the material world, even in its most refined forms, simply couldn't provide. His heart, indeed, was restless, throbbing with an unfulfilled yearning that propelled him from one idea, one experience, one relationship to the next. But what does it truly mean in our modern, often secular, sometimes cynical world to find rest in God? If God feels too loaded, too specific to a doctrine, let's unpack it. Augustine's journey suggests this rest isn't about ceasing to strive or giving up on life's challenges. It's not about becoming passive or intellectually stagnant. Instead, it's about aligning oneself with that which is ultimate, that which provides enduring meaning and purpose. It's about discovering a source of peace not dependent on external circumstances, on fleeting success, or others' approval. For Augustine, this was a deeply personal, relational encounter with the divine. For us today, it might manifest as a profound sense of connection to something larger than ourselves, perhaps the awe of the natural world, the pursuit of truth, or a deep spiritual practice. It's about finding an anchor for our souls, a place where the endless striving, the constant comparison, the insatiable desire for more can finally quiet down. It's about recognizing that some desires can never truly be filled by material possessions or temporary achievements, because they point to a deeper, more fundamental need for transcendence, for connection, for an ultimate reality. Augustine's Confessions isn't just an autobiography. It's a universal human story. It's a testament to the idea that beneath all our pursuits, all our efforts to build a life, all our attempts to find happiness and meaning, there lies a fundamental longing for something irreducible, something eternal. And until we acknowledge that longing, until we turn towards that ultimate source, whatever name we give it, however we conceive of it, our hearts will indeed remain restless. The Confessions invites us, then, not just to reflect on Augustine's journey, but on our own. It asks us to consider where we truly seek our rest, and if those places offer more than temporary distraction. It challenges us to look beyond the immediate, beyond the superficial, and to open ourselves to the possibility that true, lasting happiness isn't found in what we acquire, but in where we ultimately belong. It's in finding that spiritual home, that undeniable connection to the divine, that our souls, at last, find their rest. Your 7-day Confessions action plan. Alright, so we've journeyed through the mind of Augustine, wrestled with some big ideas, and maybe even felt a little uncomfortable, which is exactly where growth happens, right? But what do we do with all this? How do we take the profound wisdom of someone who lived over 1,600 years ago and apply it to our 21st century lives? That's where our 7-day Confessions action plan comes in. This isn't about becoming Augustine, or even necessarily becoming more religious. It's about using his framework for radical self-examination and growth. Think of it as a personal retreat, guided by a master. Day 1 and 2, the Stolen Pears Journal. You remember Augustine's infamous story of stealing pears, not out of hunger, but out of a sheer, perverse thrill of doing something wrong? It's one of the most relatable moments in the entire book because we've all had our pear moments. Maybe it wasn't actual theft. Maybe it was gossip or an unkind remark or breaking a small rule just because you could. For your first 2 days, I want you to grab a journal or even just the Notes app on your phone and write about a time you did something wrong, not because you needed to, but because there was some strange, illicit pleasure in it. Could be small, it could be big. Be honest with yourself. And here's the crucial part. After you've described the incident, ask yourself, what good thing was I really looking for in that moment? Was it belonging? Freedom? Power? tension, a sense of agency. Dig deep. Augustine found that beneath his destructive thrill, he was seeking a distorted form of God's goodness. What were you seeking? Day 3 and 4, the habit audit. Augustine was a man tangled in habits, especially those of lust and ambition, for a very long time. His journey to breaking free wasn't a sudden snap, but a slow, often painful process of observation and wrestling. For day 3 and 4, I want you to identify one habit in your life that you struggle with. This could be anything: procrastination, endless doom scrolling, a negative self-talk loop, reaching for that extra snack, biting your nails. The key here is not to try and stop it. Not yet. Your mission is simply to observe it without judgment. Become a detective of your own behavior. When does this habit appear? What are the triggers? What are you doing or feeling right before it starts? What happens during? How do you feel immediately after? Just watch it like an anthropologist observing a strange tribe. This non-judgmental observation is the first step toward understanding, and understanding is the first step toward change. Give yourself 2 days to really tune into that one habit. Day 5, the memory palace. Augustine spends an astonishing amount of time exploring the labyrinthine depths of his own memory. For him, memory wasn't just a filing cabinet. It was a vast, mysterious palace, holding not just facts, but emotions, experiences, and even a pathway to understanding truth. On day 5, find 15 minutes of quiet time. Sit comfortably, close your eyes if you wish, and choose a single memory. It doesn't have to be significant. It could be something as mundane as what you had for breakfast last Tuesday, or a snippet from your childhood. Now, instead of just recalling it, I want you to follow it. See where it leads you. What other memories does it connect to? What emotions does it evoke now versus then? What does that memory, viewed through the lens of your present self, teach you now? Our past isn't fixed. Our interpretation of it evolves. What fresh insight can you glean from an old experience? Day 6 and 7, the Toli leg moment. This is perhaps the most famous moment in Confessions. Augustine, at his lowest point, hears a child's voice chanting Toli, leg take up and read. He opens a Bible at random and finds the passage that utterly transforms his life. It was a moment of profound surrender and divine guidance. For your final 2 days, when you find yourself facing a small dilemma, and I mean small, don't ask it to solve a life crisis. I want you to try your own Toli leg moment. It doesn't have to be a religious text. It could be a book of philosophy, poetry, a spiritual text from any tradition, or even a novel you cherish for its wisdom. Open it to a random page. Read the first paragraph or 2 that catches your eye. Don't force it. Just be open to what insight it might offer. This isn't magic, it's practice. Practice in surrendering your need for an immediate, self-generated answer and opening yourself up to an external perspective, a moment of serendipity. It's about cultivating a receptive heart and mind, trusting that answers can come from unexpected places. And that's your 7-day journey. Each step is small but profound. This isn't about instant transformation, but about starting a journey, just as Augustine did, towards a deeper understanding of yourself and the world around you. I encourage you to truly embrace this plan. Let me know in the comments how it goes, what you discover. It's a process, not a destination, and it starts right now. All right, we've journeyed through Augustine's turbulent early life, his intellectual battles, and his profound spiritual awakening. His confessions are far more than just a historical account. They're a mirror reflecting the universal human experience. As we wrap up our dive into this masterpiece, I want to distill its essence into 3 foundational, timeless truths that resonated deeply with me, and I believe will resonate with you too. Think of these as enduring anchors, easily recalled and ready to apply to your own path. This is summary, 3 truths from a saint's soul. The first profound truth from Augustine's heart is this: the human heart is restless. We all carry within us a deep longing for meaning that worldly success, fleeting pleasure, or even vast knowledge alone cannot truly satisfy. Augustine, in his own words, famously declared, "Our hearts are restless until they rest in you." He spent years pursuing every imaginable avenue for fulfillment. intellectual prestige as a brilliant rhetorician, indulging in hedonistic pleasures, seeking answers in various philosophical schools, and trying to build a life of conventional success. Yet, through it all, there was this persistent, gnawing emptiness, an unquenchable thirst. It's a feeling I think many of us can relate to. We achieve a goal, we acquire something we thought we desperately wanted, we experience a peak moment of joy or connection, and for a brief time it feels enough. But inevitably, that feeling subsides, and the question surfaces again. Is this all there is? That restless longing isn't a flaw, it's a built-in compass, a divine ache that points us towards something far grander and more enduring than anything the material world alone can offer. Augustine's life is a testament to the fact that until we address the deepest spiritual yearning, we will continue to wander, seeking satisfaction in places that can only ever provide temporary reprieve. Which leads us directly to the second powerful lesson. Transformation is an act of surrender. We often envision personal transformation as a heroic battle of willpower, a relentless struggle against our old habits and desires, where sheer grit and determination eventually win the day. And certainly, willpower has its place. But Augustine's dramatic conversion, his Tolley leg moment in the garden, paints a different, arguably more profound picture. After years of intellectual wrestling, of knowing what he should do but feeling utterly incapable of doing it, his breakthrough came not from a new argument or a stronger resolve, but from a complete and utter letting go. It was a moment of grace, a profound surrender where he stopped fighting himself, stopped trying to solve the puzzle purely with his intellect, and simply opened himself to something beyond his own efforts. He ceased striving and instead received. True, lasting change, the kind that fundamentally alters your trajectory, often doesn't arrive on the back of brute force. Instead, it emerges from a vulnerable, sometimes desperate moment of letting go, of acknowledging our limitations, and making space for a greater force, whatever you conceive that to be, to act within us. It's an invitation to release the tightly clenched grip of control, to trust that by surrendering our own perceived control, we actually open ourselves to a far more powerful and transformative experience. It's about humility and the recognition that some battles are won not by fighting harder, but by laying down your arms. And finally, the third enduring truth: the ultimate journey is inward. Augustine's confessions are, at their core, an extraordinary act of self-examination, a brutally honest and deeply personal excavation of his own soul. He didn't seek truth primarily in external doctrines or the pronouncements of others first. He sought it by relentlessly looking within. He dissected his memories, his motivations, his sins, his virtues, his doubts, and his burgeoning faith with an unflinching gaze. In a world constantly pulling our attention outward, towards social media, news, external validation, consumerism, Augustine reminds us that the most significant and transformative discoveries aren't found in the external clamor, but in the quiet, often challenging, landscape of our own inner world. The path to finding truth, to understanding God, to achieving genuine peace, doesn't begin with a quest to change the world, or even primarily to understand complex theology, but with a courageous, brutally honest look inside ourselves. It's about confronting our shadows, understanding our deepest desires, and recognizing the divine spark that resides within. This internal journey isn't a one-time event. It's a lifelong practice of introspection, of cultivating self-awareness, and daring to be truly honest with ourselves about who we are, what we truly seek, and where our true compass points. It's a journey that can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it is unequivocally the most rewarding and necessary voyage any of us can undertake. So, these three truths: the restless heart seeking meaning, the power of surrender in transformation, and the essential inward journey. They are not just ancient theological points. They are timeless blueprints for a deeply examined, fully lived human experience. May they serve as anchors as you navigate your own journey, prompting reflection and guiding your path toward deeper understanding and peace. We've journeyed together through the labyrinth of Augustine's mind, witnessing the inner struggle of a great soul, the endless transformation of a heart searching for meaning. Though written in the 4th century, his story still resonates deeply today. It's the story of every human being searching for truth, for purpose, and ultimately, for themselves. Now that we've reached the end of this path, I'd love to hear from you. Among everything we explored, Augustine's battle with desire, his restless pursuit of wisdom, the grief over his friend's death, or his struggle between faith and reason, which part spoke to you the most? What moment in his journey touched something within your own heart or mind? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In our shared stories, we find community, a deeper understanding of life's challenges and triumphs. I truly look forward to reading your reflections, because every new perspective enriches this dialogue. If this conversation about Augustine offered you something meaningful, a new thought, a spark of reflection, or simply a different way of seeing, please consider hitting the like button. It really helps the channel grow and allows us to keep exploring life-changing works like this one. And if you'd like to continue this journey of wisdom and self-discovery, make sure to subscribe so you won't miss the next video. Let's build a community of seekers together. But the deepest journey is always the one you take yourself. I sincerely hope today's discussion inspires you to pick up a copy of the Confessions of St. Augustine. Nothing compares to the experience of holding the book, turning its pages, and letting Augustine's words echo through your own soul. It's more than a historical text. It's a companion, a mirror reflecting your own questions and struggles. There are many wonderful translations to explore. Finding the one that speaks to you can be part of the adventure. Let Augustine guide you through the intricate corners of the human spirit. And speaking of journeys, our exploration of the human experience is far from over. In future videos, we'll continue our pilgrimage of the mind, perhaps diving into the Consolation of Philosophy by Boethius, written from prison as he searched for meaning and comfort in unimaginable hardship. Or we may turn to Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, uncovering the inner reflections of a Roman emperor who found peace and wisdom through Stoic philosophy. Each of these timeless works holds profound lessons for us. Until then, keep asking the big questions. Keep exploring the landscapes of the heart and mind, and keep journeying inward. Thank you for being here, for being part of this community of seekers.